A bridge that brings people together. And here in the Commonwealth, it's no different. From the gridiron to the hardwood and beyond, we all have a team we love to talk about. Now for the teams you care about, here's Heartland Sports Live with Trevor Rice.
And good afternoon, Trevor Rice with you on 106.1 ESPN Radio and 1400 AM. We welcome you into Heartland Sports Live as we have a lot to talk about. It's a beautiful time of the year, people. Usually people think that, the holiday season is the best time. No, they were wrong. The first complete weekend of high school, college, and pro football is arguably the best time of the year. The only thing that's unfortunate about that whole thing is we couldn't have a 3-day weekend. We had it last weekend, which was still great. But I feel like the NFL season, you almost need like that Monday off just because of the first week, just because, you're recovering. You're recovering from watching the big moments that happened yesterday. And whereas guys like Tom Brady never seem to age, and now they have Antonio Brown, is it safe to say that the Patriots will be contending possibly for a 7th championship this year? Well, I guess technically next year, because that's when they play the Super Bowl. Hopefully, we have some competition there. I think the Chiefs are going to look good, obviously, once again. I think they're one of the favorites. I think that the Tennessee Titans made some noise yesterday as well as we look at that game, because we are Tennessee Titans affiliates. You can hear them every week here on 106.1 ESPN Radio, and they took on the Cleveland Browns yesterday. The Cleveland Browns, who were said to probably win double figures on the win category this season, which they still might. It's only week one, people. I mean, you got to take it for what it's worth. 1-0 though is what it says for Tennessee as they win 43-13 yesterday, and completely dominating. Cleveland won the first quarter, but it was Tennessee the rest of the way, scoring 9 in the second, leading 12-3 or 12-6 at halftime, scoring 10, outscoring Cleveland 10-7 in the third quarter, then 21-0, 21 points in the fourth quarter. The Titans just let her rip and took over the game, winning 43-13. In fact, they had one of the highest point totals of the day. Not as high as the 59 points that Lamar Jackson put up for the Baltimore Ravens against the Dolphins, but it's still respectable considering the fact that the Browns were supposed to be a complete team, or more of a complete team this year with all the pieces they had coming in, skill position players. The defense was supposed to be improved, but the Titans under Mike Vrabel showing that they may be a legitimate contender in the AFC this year. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to have a deep run right now in the playoffs, but if they start getting wins like this in their own division, the AFC South, where they're playing teams like the Houston Texans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who now have are back with their backup quarterback. It seems like Jacksonville, whenever they may have a quarterback situation figured out, it always does not come to fruition. And the Indianapolis Colts, who don't have Andrew Luck now. I would have picked the Colts to win the AFC South before it all was all said and done with Andrew Luck. But when he retired before the season began, it's wide open. It is wide open for any of these teams to take, and I think they all realize that. Mike Vrabel understands that. And Marcus Mariota, if he can stay healthy, could be that guy to lead the way. I'm just saying, people. I'm just saying. Just could be that case. Let's go ahead and look at this game more in depth. As we look at the Titans, Marcus Mariota, 14 of 24, 248 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. That is the Mariota we need to see week in and week out. Derrick Henry, 19 carries for 84 yards, had a touchdown yesterday as well. So you knew he was going to be the primary back going into this season. How would he be able to sustain what he did a year ago? The answer, I think it's safe to say, yes, he can do that. Some receivers had some big games. In particular, a tight end, Delaney Walker, had 5 receptions for 55 yards, had 2 touchdowns. So whoever picked him up for fantasy football had a good week one. Derrick Henry had a receiving touchdown as well to go on top of that rushing touchdown that he had. Had one reception that went for 75 yards, which is a pretty good day at the office. I think if everybody could average a 75 yard or just a 70-plus yard reception in general, they'd be making more than what they're worth at that point, just because that's some pretty good production. 3 receptions for A.J. Brown, who had 100 yards yesterday. No touchdowns, but still a pretty good day regardless. So you look at the receiving core, not bad for the Titans as they ended up winning 43-13. Browns ended up struggling. Baker Mayfield, 25 of 38, 285 yards, had 3 interceptions. I think the strong point of the Titans this season, and it would make sense because Mike Vrabel played linebacker for the New England Patriots, so it would make sense that they would be stronger on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side. And I think that was one of the point of emphasis coming in for Mike Vrabel, is to have a stout defense to help the offense out and maybe not make them rely on trying to win ball games, because I feel like that this Tennessee defense is going to be one of the better ones in the league. When you force 3 interceptions like they did yesterday against Baker Mayfield, that's a good start to the season. If they can do that week in and week out against backup quarterbacks in their own division, like the Colts, for example. Now you have the Jaguars. We'll see what that situation looks like. And if they can contain Deshaun Watson like they did at times last year, the AFC South could be for the Titans to take. And hopefully we'll have Mike Keith on here. Maybe, I don't know if we're going to have him next week. I'm going to try to have him on in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just to get his thoughts on this Titans organization, because he gets to see them week in and week out, and he can talk about them a whole heck of a lot better than I could. So the Tennessee Titans 1-0 on the season. They, coming up next, will take on the... Let me see. Got to find out who I'm looking up here. The Tennessee Titans will play... I'm trying to remember as I pull up their schedule. Who do they play? They play the Jaguars next. No. They play the Colts next, and then the Jaguars. Jaguars on a Thursday night. So a couple of divisional games coming up. The Tennessee Titans will play the Colts this Sunday, who I don't know what to expect from them. I think they're going to have a strong defense. I think this could be a defensive struggle this Sunday. It's a 1 p.m. kickoff. You'll be able to catch the action here on 106.1 ESPN Radio with Mike Keith and Dave McGinnis, who will be on the call. The Titans pregame coverage will be at noon. And then next Thursday, a quick one, as the Jaguars will be hosting the Tennessee Titans, an 8:20 p.m. kickoff. So a couple of quick games there for the Titans. You don't like to see that. Can we do away with Thursday football? I don't like to think about in the middle of the week, like thinking about my fantasy football lineup, because sometimes those games sneak up on you and you forget about them. So can we not do the Thursday football thing anymore, please? That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Well, let's go elsewhere, because where the Tennessee Titans had success, so did all of our area college teams as well. Kentucky picked up a victory against Eastern Michigan on Saturday, winning 38-17. The Louisville Cardinals won big over Eastern Kentucky, finally dominating a team that you felt like they should have. 42-0 over Eastern Kentucky. It was not even close, and the scoreboard reflected what you saw out on the field if you're a Cardinals fan. And then Western Kentucky, they flopped against Central Arkansas in the closing stages of last week's game, losing 35-28. This week, they come out in a nail-biter, winning 20-14 over FIU, improving to now 1-1. Let's look at that Kentucky game real quick, though, and then we'll go to Louisville, Western Kentucky, as a bunch of question marks right now. Terry Wilson, his status, 14 of 26, 114 yards, went down with an injury. A lot of people fear that it may be a season-ending injury. If that is the case, not good, as he was kind of that guy that people were expecting to carry this team. You know, last year was very conservative with him at the helm, but you felt like there was a lot of promise there that if they did open up the playbook, Terry Wilson could see some success. And now it doesn't look like they're going to have him. the rest of the season. Unfortunately. At the time of this, we don't know. So hopefully everything will look good. But there was that clip with Mark Stoops there in the postgame talking to Eastern Michigan's head football coach saying he's going to be out the rest of the season. And then Eastern Michigan's coach ended up apologizing, saying he was very sorry about that. It happens. It's football. There's contact. Injuries are going to be happening, and you just never know when to expect them. So how does Kentucky move on? Sawyer Smith went 5 of 9, 76 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Lynn Bowden had that one pass as well. 1 of 1. That's a good day at the office. 32 yards as well. So let's see if Sawyer Smith can be the guy to maybe bring this Wildcats offense together and maybe have a decent season. Now, as promising as if you're a Wildcat fan, having Terry Wilson, probably not. But we'll see. We'll see. Smoke had 92 yards receiving, running 11 carries on the day, 1 touchdown. Rose had 17 carries for 82 yards rushing, had 1 touchdown. Terry Wilson had 8 carries on Saturday for 43 yards and a touchdown as well. Receiving, Wagner had 3 receptions for 71 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Lynn Bowden had 7 receptions for 54 yards and a score as well. For the Louisville Cardinals, as the Wildcats won 38-17, by the way. Louisville Cardinals, they were in action as well on Saturday, taking on an Eastern Kentucky team who was rolling in at 1-0. But it was one of those games where you felt like the way that Louisville performed against Notre Dame in week 1, that they would come out and they would take care of business. And that's exactly what they did from the very start. As we look at Juwan Pass's numbers, 12 of 19 on Saturday, 196 yards, had 4 touchdowns, did have that 1 INT, but I think the 4 touchdowns pretty much outshined the 1 INT, as the Cardinals won 42-0 on Saturday. Javian Hawkins had 11 carries for $123, averaged 11.2 yards per carry. Malik Cunningham had 4 carries for 73 yards, averaging 18.2 and 1 touchdown on the day. Hassan Hall had 15 carries for 58 yards with 1 touchdown as well. And then Juwan Pass had 4 carries for 37 on Saturday. So a good showing for Louisville, beating a team that out of the FCS that you felt like they should have just taken it to, and they did. There was times over the last couple of seasons where they were playing teams that you felt like they should have just given them the business, never did. And I feel like that Cardinals fans are much more satisfied with this, especially coming off of a pretty good showing against Notre Dame. Yes, Notre Dame took care of business in the second half of that game, but Louisville showed up and was punching Notre Dame in the mouth there in the first half. And I think Cardinals fans were excited just because there was enthusiasm on the sideline. They were showing some effort on the field, and I think that's what Cardinals fans really missed about this team over the last few seasons. Western Kentucky on Saturday improving to 1-1, winning 20-14 over FIU. And Stephen Duncan went 19 of 33, had 241 yards passing, 1 touchdown. Did have those 2 INTs on Saturday. Gage Walker had 27 carries for 100 yards and 1 touchdown as well. And you look at everybody else, there was really not a whole lot of action. Walker saw a majority of the carries on Saturday, and it was not even close. The next highest was Stephen Duncan, who had 4 carries, the quarterback, for -2 yards, which usually means he was sacked or tackled in the backfield. Just saying, that's how that goes. Lucky Jackson in receiving yards had 6 receptions, 93 yards, averaged 15.5 a catch. And also Kyle Fortenberry had 5 receptions for 74 yards, averaging 14.8, as the Hilltoppers won 20-14. In high school football action on Friday, North Hardin improved to 3-0 with a defensive showing against Ballard. I saw that story in the paper, winning 10-6 on Friday night against Ballard, a team that I guess we didn't really know what to look for. They came into that game 1-1, and I guess it was true. We've talked to Mike Matheson. We've spoken with Bobby Thompson. And they both felt like the strong suit of this team was going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And so far here in the early going, they are showing exactly that. The most they've allowed is 14 points. So this team's averaging about, on defense, allowing the opposition to score probably around 10 or 11 points a game, which isn't bad, considering the fact that the offense has been kind of slow at times. Even though against Wagner, they did show up for that game. But it was very sloppy. A lot of turnover. I think they had 7 turnovers that game. And then against Elizabethtown, really didn't show the offense that maybe you expected. But like I said, you go from a year ago having a senior quarterback, now you go to a sophomore, and I think they even switched quarterbacks for this North Hardin game as well, to try to see if they can get anything going on offense. So North Hardin takes care of business under Brent Thompson, improving to 3-0. John Hardin and E-Town went at it Friday night, and it was Elizabethtown all over John Hardin, winning 37-6. There was a running clock in that game as the Bulldogs fall to 0-3. And like I said, they a tough stretch to this first half of the season. Danville, Central Hardin, E-Town, Meade County going on this week. North Hardin. Man, the schedule just does not get any easier. And speaking of Meade County, we'll get to them shortly. They are still, I believe, undefeated on the season, as well as they won this past Friday night. Elizabethtown, like I said, winning 37-6, improving to 2-1 under Mark Brown. Had a lot of rushing yards on Friday. The offense kind of slowed up a little bit there in that second and third quarter, as it seemed like maybe Mark Brown was trying some different things with the offense. They just never could click, but eventually went back to the ground and pound game and took care of business there in the fourth period, as it was 37-6, the final score on Friday. For Central Hardin, they were in action as well, as we get ready to highlight them here. Looking at their score, 51-20, another big win for them as they took on Apollo. They'll play Elizabethtown this week, which will be our Blaine and Birdwhistle High School football game of the week. That going on Friday. 7:05 is the pregame, 7:30 p.m. kickoff this Friday on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM, and we will live stream it as well on ESPNKY.com. But 51-20 on Saturday, as it was another game for Chase Elmore, 6 of 11 passing, 119 yards, 3 touchdown completions there. Kyler Lee had 14 rushes for $136 with 2 scores. Deonka Wilkerson out of the backfield had 9 rushes for 129 and 1 touchdown. Gavin George just doing it all over. Once again, 4 receptions, 98 yards, 2 of those for touchdowns. And I want to say he had a kickoff return for a touchdown as well. I have to go back and look, or maybe it was. No, maybe I was thinking it was that. I know he had that kickoff return back a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if he had one here, but I know he had the 2 receiving touchdowns. Regardless, Evan Jones had what's a pretty good night for kicking as well. 6 of 6 from extra points, and then made a field goal as well. So Central Hardin taking care of business. In fact, they are looking like when you're averaging 50 points a game right now, like Central Hardin is, it's hard to argue that they're not looking like the best team in our area right now. They scored 49 in week 1, 50 last week, 51 on Friday. What will they do against E-Town? I think E-Town's going to give them more of a challenge this Friday. Is that, like I said, it'll be our Blaine and Birdwhistle High School football game of the week. I think E-Town's defense might be a little bit better than what they've faced so far. So I'm actually curious to see how Central Hardin takes care of business on Friday, or tries to anyway, against Mark Brown's club. And I'll have interviews with both coaches before that game as well, that you'll be able to get their thoughts on the matchup. So that's going to be a fun one at Elizabethtown High. That's where we're going to be at. 7:30 p.m. kickoff this Friday, the Blaine and Birdwhistle High School football game of the week on 106.1 ESPN Radio. Meade County, they were in action once again, 41-20. Victors over Pleasure Ridge Park on Friday as they improved to 2-0. They won against Franklin Simpson in week 1, 26-21. So the Green Wave, they are 2-0 on the season. They will take on John Hardin this week as they'll be at home, a 7:30 p.m. kickoff over there. And real quick, let's go and see if I can find Fort Knox. I never did get an update on where they were in that game as we check out their score from Friday. They ended up losing to Eminence 44-22. So the Eagles starting off the season at 0-2. They will look to try to get back on track here, not this Friday, but next Friday as they head west and take on Fort Campbell at 7 p.m. And while we're at it, let's check on LaRue County real quick because I definitely want to get them in here as well as I try to find their score. Let's pull them up. LaRue County, they won 28-7 over Casey County. As we just look at some of the stats real quick from that game, Connor Baker had he went 2 of 5, 45 yards, had 1 touchdown completion in that game. Jeremiah Belton had 29 rushes as he's the leading back for the Hawks this season, had 129 yards. And then Connor Baker with 9 rushes for 62 and had 1 touchdown as well. So that's a look at from high school, college, and pro, all 3 divisions here on Heartland Sports Live in segment 1. When we come back, though, I'm going to have Lars Anderson, who's put out a new book, and basically comparing Nick Saban to Bear Bryant. Bear Bryant, of course, pretty much got his coaching tenure going here in the Bluegrass over at Kentucky. Spent, 9 or 10 seasons over there in Lexington. We're going to talk about that book coming up here in just a moment on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM. This is Heartland Sports Live, and you can listen to it. And back tomorrow, for example, we'll have the show uploaded on ESPNKY.com. Back with more after this.
Sports, a bridge that brings people together. And here in the Commonwealth, it's no different. From the gridiron to the hardwood and beyond, we all have a team we love to talk about. Now for the teams you care about, here's Heartland Sports Live with Trevor Rice.
Welcome back into Heartland Sports Live, and I have on the phone line with me another person who wrote a book, and of course we've been talking to a few authors here recently. Lars Anderson joining me right now, Chasing the Bear, How Bear Bryant and Nick Saban Made Alabama the Greatest College Football Program of All Time, and Lars Anderson joining me right now. Lars, I want to thank you for joining me on my program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Let's go ahead and talk about your time. Now you spent time in New York. Now you're in Birmingham. So let's talk about that change in itself because you go from an area where they're not talking college football to an area where they live and breathe it. How did that transition go?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, believing that Nebraska fans were the most rabid, diehard in the country, and then moved to New York City, worked at Sports Illustrated for 20 years and lived in Manhattan for 15, and ended up following a girl down to the Deep South and moved to Birmingham, and while still covering college football for SI. And I was just blown away by, it's almost like a different country down in the Deep South, just their passion for college football. It is unmatched, unrivaled. You know, the day before the Super Bowl, they're not talking about the Super Bowl. They're talking about recruiting here in Alabama. It's all about Auburn and Alabama 24/7, 365. And, you know, when I moved from New York to here, to Birmingham, it coincided with essentially when Nick Saban arrived. And so the idea for the book has sort of been percolating for, you know, over 10 years. I have interacted a lot with Coach Saban over the years, doing various Sports Illustrated stories. I wrote a book called The Storm and the Tide, which was about the tornado that went through Tuscaloosa in 2011 and the impact that that had on Saban and the entire Alabama program. And so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of who Saban is and what makes him tick and what distinguishes him from other coaches. But I didn't have a good feel for Bear Bryant. And, of course, living here, I'm around people who played for Bryant, who worked with Bryant, who had friendships with Bryant. And really what I wanted to do in this book was kind of put the two side by side, write a dual biography, but not do just sort of a year-by-year dry look at the results they achieved, but rather look at bigger themes and try to examine and show how they did it instead of just saying that they did something. Just show through, stories and anecdotes of what were their distinguishing characteristics, and then what similarities do they have, what differences, and what can be gleaned from their experiences. And there are so many similarities. They both grew up in rural areas. Bear Bryant worked on a farm in Nowheresville, Arkansas, as a kid, and he'd be up at 3:30 in the morning, tending to the mules and making sure all the animals had food. And by the time he got to school, he would literally be covered in dirt, didn't smell good by his own admission, was made fun of by other students. He developed a deep inferiority complex, which is something he carried with him throughout the rest of his life. But he realized that football was sort of his escape. His very first practice, he didn't even know the rules of the game. A coach just spotted him because he was really big for his age, and he was a big man. The coach just said, put him on a punt on the punt team, and the coach said, "Okay, you see that guy down there? He's going to catch the ball. You go down there and kill him." And Bryant did just that. He went down there and absolutely crushed the guy. And if you're going to distill his coaching philosophy, it was that. You see the guy, you try to kill the guy. And Bryant was all about toughness. And he would put his players through waking hell in practices. We all know about the infamous Junction Boys practice when he was the coach at Texas A&M. Working out his kids for 12 hours in 100-degree heat, not giving them water breaks, even giving them salt tablets, which only increased their dehydration and thirst. And he took that same approach when he got to Alabama, and it was almost sort of a Darwinian approach, just to weed out and make it a survival of the fittest. And his early teams didn't have the most athletic talent in the world, but they had toughness. And that was drilled into them by Bryant, and really was the sort of foundational success he had early on. And Saban, he grew up in rural West Virginia, worked for his dad at Saban Service Station, a gas station. He did everything from oil jobs to cleaning windows to pumping gas. And everything had to be done to a standard of excellence, and that's a phrase that Saban learned from his father. And in fact, Saban repeats a ton of phrases that his dad taught him as a kid. Standard of excellence. Everything had to be done the right way. And Saban also ever says right is never wrong. He says that all the time, and he learned that from his dad. Always do the correct thing, which is directly in front of you. And Saban, too, sort of used football as an escape from his hometown to get to Kent State on an athletic scholarship. And both were overachievers as players. And then both of their dads died at age 46, which infused in both guys, I think, a sense of urgency to accomplish things in life, because they knew from a very young age how precarious life is, how fragile it is, and really was a motivating source for both of them to accomplish as much as they could as soon as they could.
Lars Anderson joining us right now, chasing the bear. How Bear Bryant and Nick Saban made Alabama the greatest college football program of all time. That book is out now. Joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Of course, people in this area know the Bear from his time spent at Kentucky. Maybe they didn't get to see him, in person because I was so far back. Did he kind of you kind of alluded to it? Did he pretty much keep that same mindset throughout his entire coaching career, or did Bear Bryant evolve in any way other than maybe his style of clothing on the sideline?
Yeah. At Kentucky, he always felt that he was, quote, the other coach, that he was overshadowed by Adolph Rupp, and that he would never get the sort of treatment that Rupp got. Whatever Rupp wanted from the administration, Rupp received. And what made the Alabama job so attractive, one, he went to Alabama, played at Alabama, but two, the administration basically said, hey, this is a blank check. Any of the resources you need to support your program, we will give you. And that's exactly what they said to Nick Saban as well. And so, and at the time, for both Saban and Bryant, when they came to Alabama, both were considered coaching nomads. Like they would go to a program that was broken and fix it and then move on. And but when they each got to Alabama, they realized that the resources at Alabama, because of that fan passion, which is fueled by the fan passion, are essentially unmatched at any other school in the country, and sort of gives you a leg up over the competition. And Bryant did come close to leaving. He verbally accepted a job with the Miami Dolphins. And interestingly, it was Saban who left the Miami Dolphins, which is sort of another odd connection, coincidental connection between the two. But he ultimately stayed, and he then sort of evolved with both Saban and Bryant were open to change. And what Bryant did is he instituted the wishbone offense, which sort of triggered the renaissance in the second half of his career at Alabama and led to more national championships. Before, he had guys like Joe Namath, who were more sort of a drop-back passer, and Saban, he decried the spread, wide-open, fast-paced offense for years, saying it led to increased injuries because you couldn't substitute, and there's more plays, so greater likelihood of injuries. And he went on and on about that for several years. And then, after getting beat by Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl and then losing to Auburn in 2013 in the famous Kick Six game, he decided that he needed to change his offense. So he brought in Lane Kiffin, who was at the time disgraced former USC coach, and brought him in and basically gave the reins of the offense to Lane. Lane redesigned it to a spread attack, wide open spread, and that led to what Alabama has today with Tua and a core of receivers that probably three of them will be first round draft picks, and it's now the sort of it's an offense that last year was the most productive in Alabama history. But Saban is still, if those close to him will tell you that he's uncomfortable with this offense because he likes a ball control running offense that has a more of a game manager at quarterback, somebody like a A.J. McCarron or a Greg McElroy, and then just lean on your defense. So Saban, even though he's not necessarily comfortable with this offense, he knew he needed to adapt and change and evolve to keep up with the latest trends. And so many coaches are real adamant about instituting their philosophy and their philosophies on offense and defense, whereas both Saban and Bryant were pretty malleable in keeping up with the latest trends.
Lars Anderson once again joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Check out the book, Chasing the Bear, How Bear Bryant and Nick Saban Made Alabama the Greatest College Football Program of All Time. He's joining us on Heartland Sports Live. Just a little bit more time here with you, Lars, before we let you go. Let's talk about, I guess, you're down there in Birmingham. You get to interact with the fans. How are Alabama fans just so much different than, let's just say, Kentucky or Louisville fans up here? Like, what just makes them more unique and stand out, would you say?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I've dug into it, and I've actually traced this all the way back to the Civil War. And during the Civil War, Confederate soldiers believed that one Confederate was worth two Union soldiers on the battlefield, meaning they could be outnumbered, but it didn't matter because they were better fighters. Well, you get to like the 1920s, and post-World War I economic boom sweeps across the country, but it doesn't touch many places of the South, especially Alabama, Mississippi, and there's civil rights problems in the South. The South is, especially Alabama, mocked across the country for the multiple problems, the social problems that they have. But the one thing that Alabamians could rally around was their college football teams. And that was such a unifying force, and they took so much pride in the fact that their 11 guys out on the field could beat an 11 from Yale or Harvard or, the powers of the day, of the time. And much has been written about the 1926 Rose Bowl, when Alabama went out to California and beat Washington in a game that was framed sort of incorrectly, but it was framed at the time as a renewed civil war between the North and the South, even though Washington wasn't a state during the Civil War. But it's rooted in the fact that when it comes to social issues and economic issues, I think people in Alabama feel left behind, and again mocked and ridiculed by the rest of the country. But football is something that they take pride in doing better than anyone else in the country. And so there's so much sort of emotional investment and also personal identity wrapped around the Alabama football team that I think is really sort of the foundation of why they care so much more about it than the typical followers of a college football team.
Lars Anderson once again joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Lars. One thing that we do share in common, you being from Lincoln, we're both Huskers fans, so we can share that together. But check out the book, Chasing the Bear, How Bear Bryant and Nick Saban Made Alabama the Greatest College Football Program of All Time. And that book is out now, so go out and check out by New York best-selling author Lars Anderson joining us right now. Lars, appreciate the time as always.
Thank you so much.
Heartland Sports Live will continue after this on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM, and we are live streaming on ESPNKY.com. Welcome back into Heartland Sports Live, which is driven this hour by CC Power Sports, exit 121, just south of the Snyder at Brooks Road off I-65. Get your hands on a new or pre-owned Suzuki ATV, motorcycle, or scooter while the deals are hot. That's CC Power Sports, a short drive up I-65 in Shepherdsville. I want to thank Lars Anderson for joining me last segment and talking about his new book coming out, comparing the great Paul Bear Bryant with Nick Saban. I guess there's a lot of similarities between those two. They both win a lot. We'll just go with that one. We talked college, high school, and pro football in segment one. Let's go ahead and look at the Reds schedule this week. As on our airwaves, expect baseball. We're going to have some NFL action on Sunday when the Colts take on the Titans, and get you set for all of the week's festivities. Hilltoppers on Saturday, of course, and then Friday Night Lights action between Central Hardin and Elizabethtown. Reds action, though, they won 4-3 yesterday. As we just look at their schedule real quick over the next couple of days. And they'll be in action tomorrow. They have a day off day today. They'll be in action tomorrow, a late game against the Mariners, 10-10 tomorrow night. Then they'll play a late game on Wednesday as well at 10-10. And then they'll keep that string going against the Mariners. They'll wrap up a 3-game series at 10-10 on Thursday with the Mariners, the Reds will. And then on Friday, we will get back to football action. Friday night is the Bland and Bird Whistle High School football game of the week. The Central Hardin Bruins will visit the Elizabethtown Panthers, averaging 50 points. Central Hardin is so far through 3 games, taking on an E-Town club who looks to be much improved on defense this year, as they kept it close with North Hardin 1 week ago. They took care of business against John Hardin, and those 6 points from John Hardin didn't come until the closing seconds of that ball game, where it was a kick return or a punt return, kick return. I can't remember what it was by John Hardin, which ended up scoring 6 points and keeping the goose egg off the board for the Bulldogs. And so Central Hardin and E-Town going on at it Friday night, 7:30 p.m. and 7:05 is the pregame action between Coach Mattingly's Central Hardin Bruins and Coach Brown's E-Town Panthers. Will have interviews with both of those coaches before the game in the Bluegrass Cellular pregame show as well this Friday night. Saturday will be the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, which they're coming off of a victory, winning 20-14 this past week, and they will play Louisville on Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. up in Louisville, so expect that action here. 3:30 p.m. is the pregame with Randy Lee. Then he'll get you set for a kickoff at 4. And then the Tennessee Titans, like I said, playing this Sunday, coming off of a big 43-13 victory over the Cleveland Browns. They will be taking on the Indianapolis Colts. That going on this Sunday, 1 p.m. Titans will be at home, and hopefully the Andrew Luckless, if that even makes sense, Colts will struggle against the Titans. We can only hope for that sake. The Colts this past week coming off of a loss in overtime to the Chargers, losing 30-24. So that's a look at what's going on this week here on 106.1 ESPN Radio. You can follow us on social media as well at ESPN Radio 1061 on Twitter. Also like us on Facebook, 106.1 ESPN Radio. Let's look at that game going on Friday, though. Central Hardin and Elizabethtown. Central Hardin just offensively with Gavin George becoming a big key playmaker on that team. It was Kyler Lee this past week for Central Hardin. How do you stop that many weapons if you are Coach Brown? Well, defensively, I think you got to go back to that North Hardin game, how they just basically they played E-Town football the way that they do. They don't overcompensate in any category. They read the play well. They're able to identify where a receiver is going and really limit what the opposition can do offensively with their skill players. Now, how do you stop Gavin George if you're Coach Brown? Do you bring in a safety to try to help that out? I really don't know how Coach Brown plans to attack that, but when you're 6'3", like Gavin George is, which he may be 6'3" or 6'4", give or take, right in that area, usually one of the taller kids out on the football field, I would expect him to be one of those kids to be targeted quite a bit this Friday night, but we'll see how E-Town attacks the plan. Of course, Coach Mattingly likes to utilize the ground game to try to set up the pass, and Chase Elmore through the first 3 games has looked pretty phenomenal. You really can't tell that kid missed a majority of last year at this point. And then E-Town on the flip side, Clay Games, can he up his game, no pun intended, this Friday night and help that offense out? Because we saw some glimpses this past Friday against John Hardin that E-Town has the ability on that offensive line to open up some big holes for their running backs, and they have some speedsters out there. Can they keep that going this Friday night when they take on Central Hardin? They have home field advantage, so at least E-Town has that going on. And once again, you'll be able to join Bobby Thompson, my broadcast partner, and myself, 7:30 p.m. kickoff going on this Friday on 106.1 ESPN Radio, and we will live stream it as well, ESPNKY.com. So make sure you're joining us because you don't want to miss the Bland and Bird Whistle High School football game of the week. Well, I'll be back next Monday, 5 until 6. We're going to talk about all this weekend's activities. Of course, Kentucky, Louisville will be in action. Louisville taking on the Hilltoppers, which you'll hear that game right here on 106.1 ESPN Radio on Saturday, 4 p.m. kickoff. So if you're a Cardinals fan or a Hilltoppers fan, even though we are a Hilltoppers radio network, you'll be able to catch the game this Saturday. And how will Kentucky do without their quarterback? Terry Wilson going down. I guess that if there's one thing to say about Kentucky's backup, he did have experience at Troy. He comes in looking to basically take the reins and go with it. So I wish Kentucky good luck this Saturday as they get set to get back into it. I didn't even look to see who Kentucky plays this week. I know they have Florida coming up. Is it Florida this week? Yes, it is Florida this week. It is a big matchup. Number 9 Florida in Lexington this Saturday night, 7 p.m. So if you are making the trip over to Lexington, have safe travels first of all, and have fun at that game. Make it loud. Make Florida work for it. If they're gonna try to come into Lexington, and if they do win, make them work for it at the very least. I know you have a quarterback situation right now that's not ideal, but I have a feeling, being a night game, upset possibly, I could see it happening. Mark Stoops will have those boys ready, and I can't wait to watch the action. Trevor Rice with you. That's Heartland Sports Live. Next Monday, we'll be back 5 until 6. You just never know who we're going to have on the show. Stay tuned. You'll find out. Follow me on social media at Radio Trevor Rice on Twitter, Trevor Rice on Dash Air. You can like me on Facebook. Have a fantastic sports week. We'll meet back here next Monday, 5 until 6. It's Heartland Sports Live, ESPN Radio.